just want to talk about 4 areas where I think that the Congress, and particularly the Health Subcommittee, which I chair, as Dib Gephardt mentions, are playing a role in the areas that I think that are of interest to you. First of all, probably most important is the stimulus package or the Recovery Act that we passed in the beginning of this year, which continues to provide grants and funding. A very important part of that was $10.4 billion to NIH, to the National Institutes of Health, for basically biotech and other types of research. And just as an example, you may have read in the New Jersey media just in the last few weeks, they've made mention of the fact that 2 of our institutions, both the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey and Rutgers, have received major research grants, as well as money that actually could be used for infrastructure, building labs, for example, which creates jobs in a different area, but nonetheless is a big job creation factor as well. And I just wanted to mention, University of Medicine and Dentistry, for example, has had 80 medical research grants awarded through the Recovery Act so far, which is a total of $19.4 million, as well as facility renovation. Rutgers has received significant amount of money from the Recovery Act. As of October, they had received over $22 million in new grant awards. And these are not just for research, this is also to build the infrastructure, means jobs for labor guys, for example, as well as a lot of ancillary things that obviously relate to that. 3 other areas that I did want to mention that I think are of interest to you. And the second is stem cell. Within the Recovery Act is also significant money for stem cell research, and I think is it Dr. Young, right, who's involved with that in a significant way. Now, it was somewhat controversial, but something I very much supported was that in March of this year, President Obama issued this executive order to remove any barriers to embryonic stem cell research. I thought that was something I support. I think I was very concerned that we as a country were falling behind in that type of research because of the ban that essentially exists previous to that. But in the Recovery Act, there's significant money for both adult and embryonic stem cell research. And I just thought it was interesting because NIH just announced that researchers, this is just an example, that researchers have discovered how to transform human embryonic stem cells into germ cells that I guess give rise to human sperm and eggs. Now, this deals with stages of human development that are now being opened up and new things that we're finding out that we might not have found out before. So this is another area right now where there's I'm going to say a lot because I think one of you is going to talk about how we don't have enough money, and I'll never say there's a lot or there's enough because I know that that's not the case. But it is an example, again, where we can't be behind. We were always in the lead on some of this research. We were falling behind. Hopefully now we're turning that around. And I want to mention 2 others. Dick probably mentions, because you remember for years, Louise Slaughter, who's now the chairman of our Rules Committee, was trying to get the genetic non-discrimination bill passed. I think it took her 14 years. People say, what does Congress do? Well, Congress does a lot, but you might have to wait 12 years to get something done. And Louise had been fighting this battle for years because of the, a lot of the innovation that had come out in unlocking the human genome, the whole issue of using genetic research or information in a discriminatory way for employment, for example, or for insurance that you might be covered for, was a major concern. And she wanted to make sure that the federal law said that you couldn't discriminate based on that kind of genetic information. And the president, we finally passed that bill in the last Congress, and then it was President Bush, but it was still a Democratic Congress. We worked on a bipartisan basis to get that bill passed. But again, there's a lot of research opportunities there as well, because from what I understand, you can essentially do a lot more research with genetic information that allows you to be more personalized. In other words, in the way you treat people or the way you look at individuals, if they need certain kinds of treatment or help because of their genetic background. And so that's another research area that we're trying to encourage now in a major way, because it personalizes medical treatment or medical care in a way that wasn't possible a few years ago. And then the last one I wanted to mention is vaccine development. There's been a lot of discussion about this and media attention to this because of the H1N1 crisis, which we've read it over the weekend. It seems to be abating a little bit now, although it might come back again. And the fact, we actually had hearings in my subcommittee over the fact that we expected a lot more vaccine to be available, but because of the fact that they continue to be produced with eggs, okay, that there were limitations on how much vaccine could be produced in a given period of time. So one of the areas that Congress recognized a few years ago is they invested a lot of money into BARDA, which is, I get these acronyms, they're tough on me, Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority within the Department of Health and Human Services. And we devoted a lot of money to that to basically do research on this new type of cell-based technology for vaccine, which allows you to produce a lot more vaccine quickly if necessary. And this was one of the discussions that we had in a hearing a couple weeks ago in my subcommittee when there were all the complaints about not having enough vaccine be available. So there's an example of a public and private partnership. Federal dollars, money coming from the private sector to match that, where the manufacturers developed this new cell-based technology, which again is very important. Not only, now it hasn't been, we haven't been using it for this particular H1N1 vaccine, but for future pandemics, we want to make that available. And so I just use that as another example of where federal dollars can make a difference in the kind of innovation that you care about in partnership with the private sector, that we can really, when you talk about pandemics, imagine the impact that this would have, because we know that we're going to have other things, unfortunately, like the swine flu that are going to come up in the future. So I just want to mention those 4 items to talk about how important what you do is, how we need to partner with the federal government and other levels of government in dollars and in other ways to make sure that we continue to be in the forefront. And I can't stress enough how important what you do is and how we need to keep working together to have the continued success stories that you've been responsible for. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dick. Thank you.
He's got to run back to Washington. That's why we got him on here. But he's a real asset for this state. I'm sure a lot of people here don't understand what he does for the state and for the industries here in the state. So thank you, Frank, for taking your time, and good luck with healthcare reform. You have to get it done. That's my admonition.